Thanks, Dave. So this is my first CX Circle, so very excited to be here. And we've got quite a few of the Cotton On team here from all the different functions that we'll talk about today. So if you've got any questions afterwards or throughout the day, feel free to grab them. So my role, and we changed our structure a few months ago now, so I head up what we call digital enablement and brand optimization. So the main thing I'm going to talk about today is our digital enablement part, which is really how we support all of our brands to go to market with our e-com platform. So if I think about the way we're structured, it's in my team. So we have 4 key functions within it. We have our UX design and our product management team. We have our MarTech or marketing technology team. We have platform optimization, which is really about, we use Commerce Cloud as our core e-com platform, and that's really about how do we try and help our brands and customers get the most out of the platform today. And then we have our operations and support bit. So what our objective is as a team, and I'll come back to structure with our brands in a second, is we're about trying to make sure that we can deliver the best business platform for our brands to be able to go to market with their customer from an engagement point of view. So you've also probably all heard about Cotton On, but if I just talk about Cotton On first, then I'll come into e-com. So Cotton On, we're represented in about 17 or 18 countries now. A lot of it is our own business. We do some licensed products. Our head office is in Geelong. We're about 1,200 people there. A lot of people don't realise it. And we've got a few different regional offices around the world. We're made up of 5 main brands. So Cotton On would be our biggest brand that most people would know. And then we've got some other brands, Supre, Factory, Typo, and Series Life. So from an e-com point of view, we run a globally managed platform that's centrally managed by the team in Geelong, and that's running or supporting 12 different websites across 9 different markets. So we've been really fortunate in the way that Cotton On's gone to market over the years that we have local fulfillment in each of the markets we operate online, which creates a bit of an advantage for us. So we talk about brands, so those 5 brands, they're what we consider to be the customer-facing part. So my team is sort of nearly underpinning all of the brands and how we support each of the brands that I mentioned to be able to engage their customer. So we have a global acquisition function, we have a global loyalty function, but everything about the brand is then sitting within the brand. So that's trade, that's digital marketing, etc. So that's just a bit of background about our e-com bit. Now I was going to talk about our journey and how we got partly to Content Square, but the topic of the conversation today around what we've done around accelerating how we think about our customer experience, and Dave touched on earlier about it's all the little things in some respects, but it's about how we tried to break down the silos in how we approach a lot of what we do. So about 8 months ago, we reset our structure as an organisation, and what that meant for e-com is that we really moved back to a brand-led structure. So historically, through growth, etc., we had 3, if I think about for e-com, we had obviously our acquisition function, our brand function, and our core e-com function. They were quite siloed in how we approach things, and generally, we weren't all aligned on the key measures. So what we did, we really tried to flip that over and get to a model where we all had shared outcome, and it was all about trying to help our brands grow and to support the customer. So pre-Christmas, and I'm going to break this into 2 phases, what we did around our structural change leading into Christmas, and then what we've been able to achieve since then. So last year was very much about trying to take, particularly for my team, where we've been historically really focused on developing new functionality or developing new features on the website, and it's very much been that traditional roadmap bit. We've tried to really refocus that onto how do we think about that customer journey or that customer experience end to end. So some of the diagrams that we showed up earlier is really how we've tried to think about what we do to how the customer lands on the website all the way through to how they check out. Because there's no point in us saying that we've got an amazing platform if we're not getting the right conversion. What we've been able to do then is try and make sure that we've got the right insight, and the example earlier about what Content Square's done for us around speed to insight, speed to action. We get action and action that really quickly to add value, as I say, like right across the customer journey. So then we got to post-Christmas. We had a really good trial with Content Square, and we decided to launch with them in the US. Now, the reason we did the US and as opposed to global is that the US was a growth market and still is a growth market for us, and we wanted to really embed it across a few different functions in the business. Because what we really find, and I'll talk to the 4 functions in a second, but what we really find is we want to make sure that we can embed the brand teams in particular to be able to use the platform and to make sure that they can get the most out of it before we try and roll this out globally. Because there's lots of people, we talk about culture, change and communication. We really wanted to make sure we can nail that first. So I'll just start to talk a little bit about our journey now with it. So if I break it into how our leaders are using Content Square, and this is particularly in our e-com leaders, and then also then into the 4 different functions in our business and how we're using it and what we're able to start to get out of it. So the first one of these is, we saw the wheel before, but for our leaders, this has been a way to really easily and visually, and there's a real theme here that we're a fashion business, we're a very visual business, and we're a very product business. So visualization, which again, users of GA4 will realise really quickly that, or GA full stop, it's one of the areas that we've really been lacking in trying to get to that really quick insight and really visual insight that helps the teams. So for our leaders in particular, this concept of being able to use the wheel essentially where the customer's landing on the website and where they're going to, it's just helped us get to a really quick conversation about where are they bouncing, so where maybe pointing the customer into the wrong direction, how can we try and change that? Where are we getting really good traction around, in our case, we're landing them onto a category page and that's going to a product and back to a category and more product and checkout, etc. It's how do we then try and amplify that and how do we try and move customers away from bouncing off the site? So that's one of the areas that our leaders are using it. And then the second one, which has been really impactful for us, has been very much about understanding competitors. So we get a lot of, on the Salesforce platform, we get a lot of industry insight, but it's not particularly timely. So it's great to get a 3-month hindsight view of what's going on, and we can talk about internally and where we're winning and where we're losing, where we think we could be focusing more or less. But what we've found with Content Square is that essentially real-time insight into how we're performing against our peers in industry. Now, in this case, obviously very much US-centric. We've tried to get a list of the competitors, but Content Square have been very good at trying to protect that, which would be great if they would share it, but it also allows us that when we go into the different markets, so we're soon going to launch with Supra in Australia, that again, we'll get that right mix of what's going on in that market where it's relevant. So try and break that competitive view into 2 different bits. The bit on the left, which is really about what's great for insight, is just understanding, like, what's our profile of traffic on mobile versus desktop, etc. How does that really sit? It's good to know, it's good for insight. All the way through to AOV, etc. The main bit we're using, which is really about what's on the right-hand side, is the bits that then helps drive what's the areas that we need to focus on. So if we see conversion, for example, is down, is that unique to us? Or are we seeing our peers seeing that as well? Because that gives us a bit of a different lens. Are we seeing some of the session behaviour or time on our website or frustration score? It allows us just to get a bit of a read of what are the things that internally we should be thinking about and we should be trying to solve for versus what might be a trend in the market that it's good to know, but we can't necessarily have a direct influence on that. So a great example for us is if we see conversion down and time on site up and we see frustration up, that gives us a bit of a sense of where we should start to be looking. But it just removes a lot of the emotion from the conversation, and it's allowed, as I say, from a leader point of view, just to help give the clarity to the teams of where we should be focusing people. So the next one is really the 4 key functions that we've rolled Content Square out. So one of those is acquisition, we've got digital marketing, merch, and then we've got my team, which is digital enablement. So we've got, from Cotton On, ironically, we've actually got presence from all the different teams, so feel free to grab them at any point and have a chat to them about how they're genuinely finding it. The one thing I would say is we've rolled it out to the US first, and we did that really, really purposefully, but that's created some opportunity and challenge for us that we're just talking about the US, but we're a global business, so sometimes it's a little bit hard when we're trying to talk to different teams about what Content Square gives us, which is really, really rich insight, and we go to another market or talk to a different team about a different market, but we can only talk about GA. So that's just probably one, I think, reflection for us that, and I'm sure Content Square would love to have us global as well, but it's probably one thing that we've been really mindful of into the functions that are still quite regionally specific, how we leverage it, versus in my team, it's fine, right? We're looking at what's all the functional insight we get about the customer journey, how do we use that to get really quick insight to action? Because whatever works, I'll say 80% of the time, whatever works in the US, we can roll out really, really quickly. So this has been nearly our test and learn and iterate in the US to then roll out. So customer acquisition. So one of the things that we've done around this is build some workspaces into Content Square to help us really look at, as customers are landing on the site, where was the acquisition channel for that? And how has that channel performed based on where they landed? And again, through some of the competitive bit, we can understand, is our bounce rate higher than normal or is it lower than normal? Is there a learning for us about what kind of content we should be showing to the customer? And again, it's just that speed of insight. And we're now probably at that point where we're getting too much insight too quickly. We can't quite turn that into action quick enough. So that's sort of our next problem to solve. But from an acquisition point of view, as I say, we've built workspaces to be able to provide that insight to understand. As an example, we've landed a customer onto the website. We thought it was the right thing to do. We've landed them onto a product, but we happen to have sold out of that product. Now, that's great that we sold out of it, but we weren't providing a great experience to partner with acquisition to make sure that we could support a better experience on the website, so we had a better chance to try and get that customer, as an example. And we can track this stuff over time, which has always been really helpful. The second team is digital marketing, and generally what we're using this for is a couple of different areas. It's to have a really fact-based conversation with some of our marketing peers, creative teams, about what content works on the website. So we were quite amazed that we thought our home pages, which are big, beautiful imagery that sort of comes back to what we're all about, was delivering a really, really good experience for our customer. But we were amazed at how little of that website or that homepage customers are actually really seeing. So it was about 25% for us. So all of the investment we're putting in down the bottom generally wasn't getting a great deal of visibility. And we saw before around how we think about this, around what's attractive to the customer, what are they engaging in, what are they seeing. This bit has allowed the team to look at, obviously, very top of the website everyone sees, so really easy to get insight from. The further down they get and the less people see, what's really attractive to the customer and what drives value, because that allows us to either have a really simple thing of just changing the layout, or how do we just stop investing in that creative content and they can reinvest that elsewhere. So a good example would be where we've got something that's really, really attractive down the bottom of the site. In other words, to the customer, not many people see it, but those that do interact with it really, really well. It's been about how we're trying to elevate that back up to the top to try and make sure that we can amplify that value. The second bit, and I go back to visualization, it's a really quick, simple, and very visual tool and experience to put in front of very creative people. Again, go back to GA or a lot of those tools. Some of this we can get elsewhere, but we can't get it anywhere quick enough compared to what we can get out of Content Square, which has probably been the unlock for our team, is that really speed to insight. Okay, so next two functions, so merch and digital enablement. So for merch, it's been predominantly about helping understand how our categories are performing, what our customers are looking at on the website, within categories, what product are they looking at, what are they not looking at, how do we try and change some of that experience, how do some categories perform better for a customer that we might have product that we could be putting into that category. It's all been about that very visual real-time bit, because our teams, and for those that are using Content Square, know that you can browse your website and overlay Content Square in real time. So it allows you to navigate through your own category hierarchy and be able to see, oh, right, I thought that product would go really, really well because when we ranged it, we thought it was going to be a bestseller, we thought it would be a really good outfit, but it just hasn't worked online. But you can really start to see visually when you're starting to look at category pages, what's working and what's not working, and what is resonating with the customer because of product versus what we thought as the retailer would work really well. And then the last one, which is predominantly into my team, is around digital enablement, and that's been very much how do we leverage the platform to try and get to a world where we can drive really incremental improvement to drive value. I touched on it before. We had a culture which was absolutely right at the time about trying to develop feature and functionality at scale to try and deliver value. But what we lost was that real focus or embedding that more experimentation kind of mindset for both the customer but to support the brands. And we've done more A/B testing in the last probably 3 or 4 months on our platform than we've done in the 2 or 3 years prior to that. Now, there's different reasons for it, but what it's allowed us to do is get to the point of what are the things that we want to really try and learn from what we're seeing. If we go right to left from the checkout back out to the customer, it's those things that we've really been able to look at. We've added express payment as an example. That's pushed some of the things below the fold. That hasn't really worked for our customer. We didn't really think about that at the time, so it's allowed us to try and get back into that space. Also looking at how do we try and increase, whether it's on a home page or a category page or different parts of the experience, but increase what's really resonating with the customer to move that to the top. And I'll talk about a couple of use cases shortly that show what we've been able to do with that. But again, it's been very much about that speed to insight, getting that insight into action really quickly and be able to measure it. Do that on our US website, and what works is to amplify it globally. So, and that rhythm's worked really well. We'd love to then get Content Square into some of our other sites as we get it embedded into the brands. And then the last one for my team has been very much about using what's the frustration score or what's the frustration that the customer's seeing on the website that we can then go and actually address. Now, whether that's a pure technical thing that we can work with our IT team on, there's a bunch of errors on the site, we're just not really thinking about that, versus rage clicking, or a great example we're seeing at the moment is our Perks loyalty program. We're pretty much a critical mass in terms of from an acquisition point of view with it, but we haven't really changed the layout of our checkout. So we've still built it very much centered around the customer to try and get them to sign up to the program. But we're past that point now. Our customers they're already on the program. So it's actually this frustration bit of watching session replays, seeing rage clicking, has allowed us to see some of that to then look at how we try and fix it. One of the things I would say is the session replay stuff is incredibly powerful, but you can really go down the rabbit hole very, very quickly, and you start getting caught out in looking at 1 or 2 customers are doing things. So it's about trying to make sure you can get the right elevated experience. And Tara, who's our client success manager, has been really good at helping us understand, and well done, Tara, at helping us understand how we try and look at multiple data points to try and draw a conclusion, because again, we would get lost in the detail on one particular thing and it would start to go down, but she was very good at pulling us back out to be able to go, right, what's the 2 or 3 things that help validate this hypothesis to then be able to go and take action on. So I'm just going to talk through 3 different use cases, and as I go through, what I'll do is I'll just try and talk through the things that we've looked at in Content Square to try and get to these use cases, as in the process that we've gone through, and then what our thinking is about where we go to from here, because this has very much been the journey since January for us. So we're very much at the start, and we know that there's a big experimentation mindset we've got to get embedded back into the business that will really help try and accelerate some of this. So the first use case, and look, some of these will seem really, really simple, and you may look at them and go, well, they're really obvious, but to us, it's actually been not having the right data to back up what we want to do to then drive the change and measure it has been like one of the things that held us back. And if I think about if we're partnering with our brand team to drive something or drive a change, and we go back to culture and communication, we've come from a world of we were perceived to be doing it to them, as opposed to being able to work with the brand on why we're doing what we're doing. So this first use case is about what we call recently viewed as one of the recommendations or one of the recommenders on our product page. And what we were seeing through Content Square was it was down towards the bottom of product page, so it wasn't getting great views, as in the amount of customers that would see it. But of those customers that did see it, it was incredibly engaging to them, and it was driving really, really good engagement at the end of the day, revenue. So again, through a few different bits of insight to be able to go and validate what we were seeing, we made a really simple change to move that recently viewed carousel higher onto the product page to try and test if we put it more in front of the customer, what does that actually do? Now, So the outcome that you can see is there. So it was far more attractive and we're getting much higher revenue per click from that customer. Now, in isolation, it was a really good thing. But what we had to then make sure we were doing is not just taking that one thing in isolation and to make sure that we're looking at all the different aspects of that page to make sure that the sum of the parts are still delivering value, not just that one change. And that's, again, where Content Square has been really helpful, and to partner with some of the other platforms that we're using to make sure that, again, total value was up as opposed to just from that one little change. So second use case was very much for our merch team, and again, how they're using Content Square to be able to look at the experience on the site for the customer within categories. So in this one particular example, and it's always amazed me that red is good with Content Square. So that took us a long time to get used to. I don't know whether that's a French thing or something, but so what we've been able to do, or what the team's been able to do, is then use Content Square to look at, within our categories, to look at product ranging, etc., to be able to test and learn and play around with what's the right optimal model here. And so in this particular example, for a category that was underperforming, we're able to, the merch team were able to re-merch and change that to deliver increased sales week on week and change some of the behaviour in that category to improve that. Now that's just in one category. So then imagine as you amplify that across everything that we do. So again, it just helps the team really narrow their focus in what they're doing and to make sure that they can really quickly get the benefit from it. In all of these use cases, actually, again, it's being able to look at how we segment. We talk about some of the heat mapping, which is really good at the top level, but to then be able to bring this down into segmenting by customer, i.e. what's a new customer onto our website versus who's returned, are they on a mobile device, are they not on a mobile device, did they check out, did they not check out, to be able to really start to narrow in what's the most optimal journey that we can get for the customer, and then how do we get more and more customers into that journey. I think to Dave's point before, we can all get lost in what's all the variations in all of it, but this is where Content Square has been a really big unlock for our teams. All right, so the last use case is around, goes back to that kind of recommendations thing, but what we do on our homepage. So for our digital marketing team, this coupled with being able to have a really fact-based conversation with some of the creative teams around the content that adds value, this has been able to look at things that are lower down on the page again that have got really good engagement and really attractive to the customer and generate really good value when they interact with it. Again, simplistically, has been about really just trying to elevate this higher onto the page. So what we saw is we increased the exposure rate naturally by it being higher onto the page. By doing that, we saw an increase in clicks as engagement with it, and then we saw an increase in conversion rate from that asset as well. So as I say, they're probably fairly simplistic use cases, but it's just an example of where we've been able to get really clear, tangible insight really quickly across different teams as well. And this is sort of back to some of Dave's language earlier about it's about culture and communication. This is, we started this journey for our own team, but we learnt really, really quickly that we can't do this in isolation, so it's not a vertical. We really had to try and make sure we can engage everyone right back up into the brands and all the way through to acquisition. So 2 final things I'll just close on. So a few things that we've learnt in this. So experimentation, which I'm sure most of you are doing, we had really lost a bit of focus on it. This has allowed us to get back into that kind of mindset, but in doing that, what we've learnt really quickly is about engaging, whether it's our brand partners, to make sure that they can see what's going to be happening for their customer on their site and that they're on board with that, but also some of our other teams. So we really found historically our investments all been CapEx and it's a traditional finance model. Experimentation's really had to change how we engage, whether it's IT or finance, to really rethink about that. And that's been, particularly in the current climate, a bit of a challenging environment of trust us, it's okay, it's OpEx and it's a good thing. So that's one thing that we've learnt. Second one is from a capability point of view, I touched on it at the start, we thought we were pretty good at trying to get insight. It's been a very humbling experience seeing what Content Square can do so quickly and so both broad and really deep, and really realising that we need to make sure we're developing a culture of really curious people and really critical thinkers. Because again, where Tara's been really, really good at this is being able to help us what's all the different things you look at to make sure we're getting to the right thing and not sort of jumping at a shadow. Third point is Content Square is an incredibly powerful platform, but it needs really good ownership. So as we've rolled it out to our US team, it's been really critical to make sure that A, we've got the right subject matter expertise around the platform to drive the adoption, to get the most value out of it, but B, make sure that it's embedded into the ecosystem. So I touched on it before that most of our countries are still using GA, so when we bring Content Square into that conversation, it can be a little bit distracting. So it's probably one of our reflections has been about making sure that it's embedded into the ecosystem, not just try it off onto the side, otherwise you just won't get the value from it. The last one, which has been probably my personal reflection, is I thought we would be able to move really, really quickly. Now, that's just probably because I was a little bit overexcited with what we could see with it, but my reflection and where I've probably got to try and play a stronger lead role for my team is be really purposeful in what we're trying to do when, and be actually really patient. Because again, we thought that we'd get to a certain place really, really quickly, but we needed to actually slow down in some areas to really be able to speed up again. So what's next for us? So in a traditional CRO kind of stream, we know that we need to reset that, and we need to reset how we think about that from an experimentation, both of what we're doing in the US, but also as I mentioned before, we're going to roll Content Square out to our Super A brand or our Super A website here in Australia. So how do we try and make sure we can get that really consistent thing? Get Content Square embedded into the daily operating rhythm. So again, we're still for some of our teams, it's an and not quite an or. So we're talking to a couple of the team earlier about how do we try and nearly allow them to use Content Square exclusively and not be using Content Square and GA as an example. And that is, strategically, it's one of the things that's a really good learning for us of over time, do we need GA and Content Square, or does Content Square really become the one and only thing that we need? And I think a lot of our brand partners would be more excited by that because of the ease of use and visualization. And then the last thing, I think for us about what's next is we've learned a lot about from an acquisition point of view, as in from a website, how we're landing customers into the site. How do we do that differently? So how do we serve up a different experience based on the channel that they're coming from, whether they're new, whether they're returning, whether the product is still available or not? That's probably the next thing that as we start to really solve that checkout bit and we start to come up further, that's where we see probably one of our next opportunities. So I think I'm over time now, so I'll stop at that point, but thank you everyone for your time.